Okay, good evening and a very warm welcome, both here at the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe, the IDM, as well as online, joining us on Zoom and on our YouTube live stream, to our event on the upcoming parliamentary elections in Moldova. This event is part of our event series on parliamentary elections in the region that we do together with our cooperation partners, Campus Tivoli, as well as the Creanga Institute. My name is Sophia Beiter. I will be moderating this discussion, and I'm already very much looking forward to it. But first of all, I give the floor to Farley from the Campus Tivoli for some introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I welcome you to this timely panel discussion on the parliamentary elections in Moldova, which will take place this coming Sunday, the 28th of September. As mentioned, my name is Farley. I'm the representative of Campus Tivoli. There I lead the international agendas, and together with the IDM and the Creanga Institute, we have this long-standing tradition to put on events like these regarding parliamentary elections and other elections in the Danube region. Our mandate is political education, and we do that with trainings and with events like these. The election in Moldova is a very decisive election, so I thank you for your interest. It's decisive because of the geopolitical situation and because the people of Moldova stand before the decision whether they will orient themselves more towards Europe or towards Russia. Will they join the European Union is the big question that is also asked to the electorate. I think it is especially important for Austria to look at Moldova, because Moldova, in its geopolitical situation, is also a neutral country. So there are aspects that are interesting for Austria to look at. What does it mean to defend its values and sovereignty as a neutral country? This is an important question to be analyzed. This and further questions will be discussed by our panel of experts, Sergiu Mutaste, historian and professor at the Creanga Pedagogical State University of Chișinău, who's joining us online. He may correct me on my pronunciation later. Sebastian Schäffer, the director of the Institute for Danube Region and Central Europe, and Professor Dr. Svetlana Suveica, also a historian at the Leibniz Institute for East and Southeast European Studies. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I may hand over the floor back to Mrs. Beiter from the IDM. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I think we can look forward to a very interesting discussion. Also considering that the Moldovan president, Maya Sandu, not long ago spoke of these elections as the most consequential ones for her country. And we will discuss all of these topics and many more with our outstanding speakers that you already introduced. So also thank you very much from my side for joining us online from Germany and from Moldova, I believe. Svetlana Suveica, professor at the IO Regensburg, and Sergiu Musteață, professor in Chișinău at the Creanga Pedagogical State University, and Sebastian Schäffer, director of the IDM. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. As always, during our IDM event series on the parliamentary elections in the region, we have prepared a briefing on the situation in the country before the election. This time, the briefing has been prepared by Sebastian Schäffer and also Christine Boudou, who is our trainee at the moment at the IDM, and she will also present the briefing now. And this will also be then a good ground for the subsequent discussions. Christine, the floor is yours.
So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for to our speaker for joining us here or online. I look forward to an engaging discussion. So, my name is Christine Boudou. I'm a French student studying political science, especially Euro-enlargement, and I'm currently completing my bachelor degree traineeship at the EDM. And today, I'm delighted to introduce the discussion by presenting our briefing. And so you can have a copy here, but also find it in the EDM website. So on the 28th of September 2025, Moldovan citizens will head to the polls to elect their new MPs. And this result will be very decisive for Moldova's future, especially for their foreign policy direction, because in Moldova, the political landscape is particularly polarized between pro-Russian and pro-European factions. And has seen, for example, in 2024 during the referendum and also during presidential election. And this composition is, in this context, more present than ever. And so in 2021, the Party of Action and Solidarity, the party of the President Maya Sandu, won the parliamentary election by a landslide and obtained 63 seats. So it's allowed to form pro-European governments and allowed also many advances towards the EU membership. And for example, this path towards the EU was formalized in last July with the first summit between Moldova and EU in Chișinău. And however, all these advances could be called into question with this upcoming election if pro-Russian managed to win the election. And also because in the recent years, the current government faced many troubles about like the energy crisis or due to the war in Ukraine, or also some scandals about corruption. So it can decrease their popularity in part of the population. But in the other hand, of course, Russian meddling is becoming increasingly significant. So who are the running entities? 21 contestants were registered, 13 political parties, 4 electoral blocs, and 4 independents. So here you have the most important one which are more likely to enter parliament. And for example, Hared's September election, 4 pro-Russian parties have united in the Patriotic Electoral Bloc. So this gathering could increase their votes and also endanger past parties. And so the recent polls show that PAS will be in the lead in the upcoming election, but without an absolute majority. So it can make many difficult to create a coalition. But other polls, which don't take into account the diaspora, show that the Patriotic Bloc would came out on top. But it's important to mention that the diaspora plays an important role because, for example, during the presidential elections, the diaspora allowed Maya Sandu to be elected. So Moldovan citizens abroad played an important role. So thanks to listening, and I hand over to Sophia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this concise overview. And I think we can dive right into the discussion now. As we also heard in the introduction already, and also in the briefing before the elections, Moldova appears to be deeply polarized between a pro-EU and a pro-Russian camp. And so my first question would be actually to someone on the ground, so to Sergiu. What is the atmosphere in the society among citizens like now, a few days before the elections?
Good evening, my dear colleagues. A few years ago, it was a great pleasure to be in this hall and to discuss directly. And today, I really apologize that I was not able to come to Vienna. But of course, during next events, I will join you. So thank you so much for your interest in Moldovan realities and, of course, in the elections which are coming soon, which are crucial for Moldovan society. And your question is related about the situation, general situation. More or less, situation is stable. So people are doing daily work, what they have to do. But of course, it's stressful. It's very visible and it's very sensitive issue, the elections, because a lot of debates, a lot of electorate propaganda from different sides, and of course, a lot of insistence to vote us and not others. So it doesn't matter which party is coming in front of you, but The last week, you know, always it's very active and dense events and activities until Friday. So the more and more activities are coming, and I think also discussions and more debates about the situation are around the new movie which started to be presented last week, Plaha, which is not documentary movie, but we have 10 one by one presented daily and until Friday, different activities with the, of course, heroes from the Moldovan hero recent past. And of course, it's provoking debates about the role of Vladimir Plahotniuc in Moldovan society. And especially today, when again it was launched the news that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow they'll bring him from Athens to Chișinău. So anyway, it's somehow it is related to the political situation in Moldova in general and to the election campaign in special. And also his just recent declaration on the post on the Facebook, his Facebook page, that he is returning and will be involved in different social projects. So before he said in political projects. So now it's of course around this news, many things are happening. But coming back to the few slides which you presented very well, the situation and some let's say result of recent surveys are reflecting that the situation in Moldova and still past the government party, the ruling party, it's a priority for citizens, but it's not enough places which we expected, or for them, which they expect to establish the government and to try to continue ruling the country as they did during the last 4 years. So the other 3 or 4 parties, it depends which survey you'll check, are all of them, even if they declare themselves pro-European, actually all of them looking to the background of the leaders, looking to the background of discourse, looking to different other declarations during the last couple of years. You'll observe even Renato Usate, as you mentioned, he is clearly pro-Russian and he is coming with the Russian business background, even if he's somehow some dossier in Russia. Anyway, his discourse now is trying to be more or less balanced and pro-European one, but we know very well that he is coming from this part of the world. And Alternativa, this political bloc of the mayor of the Chișinău in front. Anyway, if they are declaring themselves pro-European, we know that the other leaders, even the mayor of the city, before he was member of the Communist Party, he was very active in the parliament, in the government. Later on, he was very active in the Socialist Party, together with the Dodon. And nowadays, he's declaring himself as pro-European one. So it's also, I think it's speculating around this issue because it's popular and it's very attractive for majority of the citizens and the electorate. Another 2 guys, we know very well that they are coming from this area of pro-Russian, or more or less they are not supporting openly and hardly the European Union integration process. So including Marian Lupu, his party and his environment, I think many of them are coming from the area of frustration. Because they ruled the country, they was part of different political groups of the parliament, as deputies, as leader of the parliament or government, or Marian Lupu until yesterday, he was ruling the court of control court, which is of course very important position during the pro-European governing of the country. So nowadays, I think everyone are looking for receiving the seat in the parliament and to come to the power and to control the country. So how it will be, of course, we will see on Monday morning or after midnight or Sunday. Of course, we expect massive participation of Moldovan citizens in country and outside. And this is the more important to how many voters will come to will participate to the vote. And then, of course, the next step, who will support, which party will support. So during the last days, of course, it's very important what they will declare. and how they will try to converse people, citizens who are not so much interested in the politics or who are not interested to participate. So if you'll check the surveys, you'll see a huge number of citizens are passive citizens. They are not interested. So now I think they're a very important portion of the Moldovan society to decide which way will go Moldova after this new general election campaign in Moldova.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as you talked about how the parties will convince the voters, and also about the big issue of either pro-EU or pro-Russia that was very prevalent in the electoral campaign. My second question would actually be, what are other important issues for citizens, like energy, corruption, housing crisis, that are important for citizens but underrepresented in the campaign? And how are different parties addressing these issues? And maybe also, to what extent could these socioeconomic concerns shape voters' preferences, in contrast to maybe the rather big geopolitical issue? And maybe I would start with Svetlana Suveica with this question.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I will second Sergiu by saying that it's very important, and we appreciate very much that Moldova is in focus, and you organize this event in order to inform the people and also to give the platform for discussion. Yes, I am in Regensburg. I have visited Moldova in August, and I also felt I'm lucky enough to have a family who wants Moldova to join the EU. Nevertheless, the situation is, society is polarized, and also because besides geopolitical issues which are formed around EU versus Russia narrative, and those issues are framing electoral debate, and nevertheless people are interested in social economical topics. And those topics, we could see that comparing with previous electoral campaigns, those topics are underrepresented, I would say. Why is this important? The economical situation in the country is complicated. We see GDP growing by 1.2% in 2023, by 0.1% in 24. So inflation caused by pandemic, and then by the war in Ukraine was around 30%. We know that people are still immigrating, living the country, disappointed also by the lack of results in the government fight against corruption. Yes, we know several court cases are pending and so on, but we see in polling the issues that are of most concern, and those issues are economical ones, right? So high cost of living, energy prices, wages, pensions, the need for more jobs, the need for economic growth. Also the corruptions remains of concern. Also we see the difference between cities and countryside, I would say, where people are more concerned with high cost of living. So parties approach those issues, but those issues are approached or are framed in connection with the geopolitical course of the country, I would say. So the ruling party PAS says or argues that with the EU accession, the economics of the country will be will have a chance for development, judicial anti-corruption reform will continue or will be implemented, fully implemented. Also, they talk about EU standards, which will lead to energy diversification, and there will be no more energy dependency from Russia. And we know that Russia used Moldova's energy vulnerability to threaten, to manipulate in the last years. So at the same time, the ruling party is criticized for somehow ignoring or discussing less those stringent economic issues and focusing mostly on long-term European integration. plan. Patriotic bloc, Sergiu mentioned them all, yes, patriotic bloc of socialist communists. They talk about substantial social protection, the need of subsidies, the support for producers, farmers, industry, the need for deepening growing possibilities to export in the East. While campaigning at Gagauzia, I observed that they emphasized also the issue of regional inequalities. And they explain that Chișinău, in fact, is ignored. Yeah, so here I mean the government in Chișinău is ignored towards what Gagauz want, and they promised to change the situation, of course, but nevertheless we know that they were in power and did not implement necessary solution to change or to somehow diminish those regional inequalities. We have Bloc and Preuna together, I think, which cast disillusioned pro-EU voters. They discuss a lot about energy dependency from Russia and other also. So all the parties, they formulate those economic promises in direct connection with their coming geopolitical vote, right? So either Russia will give cheap gas or EU will support the diversification of energy resources. Also, last but not least, this manipulation campaigns are showing us that, in fact, for the Moldovan electorate, short-term gains are also important. And yeah, so we shall not forget that this campaign led by pro-Russian politicians with money from Kremlin are undermining democracy in general. And people, because of this campaign, people are less inclined to trust the government, to trust the institutions, Moldovan institutions, that they can, so to say, they can solve those economic and social problems. So their capacity is under question mark. So I would say that discussion is also different in the countryside and in the village, but still we believe that those issues are very much connected with what we have this geopolitical vote, as I said. Thank you.
Very much. Sebastian, do you want to add something regarding the importance of other issues that may be underrepresented in the campaign?
I mean, the big challenge from a country that is a member of the EU, I would say, is like, of course, these challenges that both Sergiu and also Svetlana have described would be alleviated with EU integration. And if we look at the situation, I mean, okay, on the one hand side, the war against Ukraine has caused some of these economic hardships in the country, but on the other hand, without that, we would not be talking about the screening process being finalized just a couple of days ago. And there we would have to see that we are too cumbersome and too slow, because it was clear that there is a time frame, and the time frame is more than 4 years, even because the last parliamentary election was actually in July 4 years ago. It's all in the constitutional possibilities, but nevertheless, we need that time, and it takes too much time that actually these kind of economic hardships are properly addressed from the side of a pro-European part. But then, of course, there's also sort of, and I mean, for me, it's hard to properly assess the situation on the ground, as I've been there last October, and I'm looking forward to see how it is when I travel there on Saturday. But what I saw last year is that the space for discussion, if you want to support EU integration, there is very limited in the options of parties that are there. And this is also something that is caused by, to a certain extent, Maya Sandu, but also past in general. This, of course, contributes to the situation that both have already described.
Thank you very much. We already heard in the presentation of the briefing about the important role of the diaspora in this election, as we have also seen this important role of the diaspora in the presidential election in 2024. So my question now would also be, maybe to Sergiu now first, how significant do you expect the diaspora to be in this election?
Of course, good question, and this is representing the reality of Moldova. The phenomenon on diaspora, it's a new one for Republic of Moldova comparatively to other countries. So because Moldovans left the country during the last, let's say, 3 decades, and this is a new social group and important group of citizens who are living abroad, but remain to be close and linked to Moldovan realities. So, which is very important, and I think it's a sensitive issue, attitude of people who are living abroad, but thinking about Moldova, thinking about relatives, maybe some of them thinking about to return back to Moldova, because many of them left the country for a short period of time, just to do some money and to invest in Moldova, to buy apartments and other stuff which they need, and that's why they're very much interested in. But we seeing around, including some candidates on the past list, for example, who are coming from abroad, including from Germany or other countries. They already settled in those countries, have a good business, but remaining to be interested in Moldovan political realities, and they're involved nowadays directly in the campaign and supporting, not just from outside, but trying to be involved directly and paying attention to the diaspora, to Moldovans who are living abroad. During the last couple of weeks, they did a lot of meetings, not just past, but also we have seen, including the mayor of Chișinău, he visited Italy or Rome, even if he had a prohibition restriction to go in Schengen area. So he succeeds somehow to pass this restriction and to visit Rome and to meet some Moldovans in Italy. So everyone is trying to pay attention and to convince Moldovans from abroad, including Moldovans from Russia. So we don't know exactly how many of them are living abroad. We have different, let's say, numbers, 500,000 in Russia, or maybe less, or maybe more, and also another 500,000 or maybe more in other European countries, and including, of course, in United States and Canada, or in other countries from the East. So I think it's already demonstrated during the presidential elections and also 4 years ago that diaspora is very important for election or for final results. So somehow they are influencing directly and make the balance in, and most of them are pro-European, supporting pro-European parties, and the last elections demonstrated most of them supported past. Nowadays, I think the picture is a little bit different, because we have also many disappointed people who expected probably more from the past and from the government, and of course from the parliament, more decisions, more strong rules, including the issues concerning corruptions. People in the country and abroad are expecting to see people who are involved or who are under process and under prosecution activities to be penalized and to be placed in jail. So not so much cases are ended, and not so many people are under arrest, or some of them have been arrested and the next day or the next day they have been liberated. So this is contributed. This situation is giving the people who expected more, and in this way, so fighting corruption, it's a long process. They succeed to do some steps, but not so much in reforming the legal system, the judge system, prosecutor system, And that's why now PAS is not so well placed if we look at, to the results of survey. So probably they will not receive so much places like it was before. Concerning but anyway, they are still expecting great support from the diaspora. And they did a lot of meetings, and they also organized different, let's say, summer school or activities to involve diaspora, to involve kids, to demonstrate that the government is still remaining close to diaspora. It is interested to give opportunities to come back for short or long period of time. Now, of course, all of them from all sides are trying to promise that they will create the best environment to come back and to invest in Moldova and to live in Moldova. But we also have many cases of people who returned back to Moldova during the last 4 years, but they have been disappointed and returned back to different Western European countries or US. So that's why I think the diaspora now, it's not the same like it was 4 years ago. It is important, probably will participate actively. I cannot say that they will reach exactly the number which was 4 years ago. Even if the number of the bulletins and the number of offices to vote are multiplied, and they printed more and they open more offices, but we will see. Because we have to take into account disappointed people, which is a huge number of them.
Yeah. Svetlana and Suveica, do you have anything to add? Do you agree with that? That maybe there are lots of disappointed voters also in the diaspora?
Thank you. More than 1 million Moldovans are living abroad, and I am among them. I would say that not every diaspora, Moldovan living in diaspora voted in the referendum pro-EU accession. So we have 77 of the diaspora votes pro-EU, at least in the referendum that took place last year. And I was a member of electoral commission here in Regensburg, and this percentage, in fact, shows also how people here in the Regensburg near voted. So of course, we cannot say that diaspora living in the EU 100% voted for this EU for EU accession in the referendum. Also because many of them were did not agree with such a strategy of having a referendum in the same day with election of the president. So various motives can be discussed. Nevertheless, I think that diaspora has a significant capacity to influence the vote, also in favor of the EU parties, naming the ruling party, PAS. At the same time, in this electoral campaign, something new, a new strategy from the side of Russia appears. So the attempt to corrupt Moldovan voters also abroad. So Russian disinformation has reached Europe. The elections in Romania have shown how dramatic this situation can be. Certain ads are spread in which money is offered. I did not come across such ads, but some people did. So there is anti-EU rhetoric spread among diaspora, anti-PAS rhetoric. Also, Sergiu mentioned that opposition is criticizing the ruling party for not being able to do a lot for diaspora, for being apparently attentive to diaspora only before elections, which with which critique I will not agree. In fact, Dodon and his political allies said bluntly that diaspora should not be allowed to vote, and they are this decision, if they obtain the majority in the parliament, I believe that they might ban diaspora from voting in future elections. Let us not forget how much diaspora contribute with money and keeps the economy of the country running. Let's not forget that still the human capital is there, and there are some projects going on in which diaspora can be involved and can share their expertise and so on. So of course it's a young diaspora, it's a dynamic diaspora, and I'm talking right now about European diaspora, of course, but we also have voters in Russian Federation and in other countries which are not pro-EU, and of course we need to take into account also this perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, Sebastian, I would also be interested in your view on the diaspora, but also on another group of voters that is also not reflected in the polls, the voters from Transnistria, pro-Russian Transnistria and Gagauzia. What role do you think they will play in the election?
So there's nothing substantial to the analysis that I could add that we already heard, but I would say that we really, I mean, if we look at the last 3 elections and the parliamentary elections in 21, the diaspora made the absolute majority possible. If you look at the presidential election, the diaspora enabled Maya Sandu to have a second term. And if we look at the referendum of integrating the goal of joining the European Union into the constitution, it was also the diaspora who tipped the scales finally in favor of this. And the big question would be if this is something that can happen for a 4th time. And as it has been described, the situation changed. There is, of course, also the challenge that I briefly tackled with, the tangible results to be felt, because of course, why would a diaspora not be in favor of closer European integration, especially the ones who vote for pass, because it makes their lives easier and their prospects better, as also it has been mentioned. But what we should not forget is that this frustration and also the handling of sort of mishandling of certain expectations. For instance, in the presidential election in Romania that has been mentioned, we could see that some of the diaspora, counterintuitively as we would see, for instance, in this country, in Austria, has voted for a president that would advocate anti-NATO, anti-European integration, and so on. So I see quite a challenge that for a 4th time, the diaspora will not be able to actually tip the scales in that favor. And when it comes to the situation in Transnistria, it's a little bit more challenging with regards to the possibility to vote, because of course, I mean, if you do not have complete control over certain parts of the territory, that makes it difficult. And there is, of course, also in the last parliamentary election, there was a lot of buses that have been provided in order to get access to polling stations. Although, if we look at, for instance, the voting behavior during the presidential election and the referendum, it was actually not the Transnistrian population who was so much voting against PAS and voting against Maya Sandu and voting against the goal of EU integration, but it was overwhelmingly the other region in Moldova, namely Gagauzia. Here, we need to see the number of perspectives. The diaspora, the theoretically pro-European diaspora numbers are bigger than in Gagauzia. But of course, if it comes to a situation where it would tip certain directions and make some coalition possible, that could have a decisive result. And here, of course, especially, I mean, the Transnistrian case is fundamentally different. I would say to the Gagauz case, especially when it comes also to the Russian interference. We could see that in the 2024 elections, there was this this money scheme uncovered. It was, what was it, 150 million euros, which is like unbelievable for a country with 2.5 million inhabitants and an average income of a couple of hundred euros. This was already a huge effort. But I see that there is also these narratives being kicked up a notch. We probably have followed that on the one hand side, there is an active training of people that have been detained, that were apparently trained in Serbia to incite demonstrations and unrest. But on the other hand, one of my favorite Russian fake news now is that the French and the Brits have already landed in Odessa to prepare to take over Moldova. And I mean, you know, that NATO would expand and playing into, or as mentioned, the neutrality aspect, that they would play into these narratives. Yeah, okay, all a given, but that we are now preparing an invasion through Ukraine of Moldova. This is really something. Still the French and the British standing in the shores and being ready to invade.
Thank you very much.
Or through Romania, there's another narrative.
Oh yeah,
And from the Romanian embassy. Yeah, there's another narrative. Sorry for interrupting, but yeah, the Romanian army, according to the Russian fake news, is preparing an invasion if possible.
Okay.
Yeah, so
very good.
I can assure you that's not the case.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we'll get back to the influence of Russia and Russian disinformation and Russian meddling very soon. But first of all, I want to talk a bit about different options for a coalition, because as we heard, it is likely that PAS will remain the strongest party, but maybe will not be able to govern alone anymore. And so my question would be, what coalition options are realistic, are possible? And also, how do you think it will change decision-making and governing the country if PAS is not in the absolute majority anymore? And maybe we can start with Svetlana, Suveica now.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a historian, so it is difficult to make predictions. We saw in your presentations the poll results of polls, and I may draw your attention to the fact that in Chișinău, also along with authorized polls, there are also illegal pollings. People on the street are stopped and called to answer some provocative questions. Nevertheless, the pro-Russian parties are making their mind how this information might be of use, or somehow to confront the official results maybe after the elections, and then provoke some unrest. So we don't know what kind of reaction there might be. In any case, we see that PAS would take the most of percentage, but nevertheless, I believe it would lose the absolute majority and would need to make coalitions. And in this case, from the parties mentioned also in your presentation, so Bloc Alternativa is declared as being pro-EU, but Sergiu also mentioned that its members are behaving not like a pro-EU politicians or playing being a pro-EU politicians, but in fact they are previous political activities, involvement with the Russian Secret Service. Apparently the mayor of Chișinău Chișinău had some connections. So I believe that due to this compromised situation, the coalition with this declared EU bloc Alternativa is unlikely. PAS would need, in this case, if they make this coalition, they would need to negotiate every law, right? So being at budget, being at judges, energy reform, whatever. So this would mean a slow adoption of complex reform, also EU-aligned necessary reform, and of course slow EU accession track. So there will be no guarantee that this the reform will continue, and acquis communautaire would also be adjusted if needed. So also we know that pro-Russian parties bloc, so patriotic, so-called patriotic bloc, so-called because there are less patriots in this bloc. So if the pro-Russian party Alternativa and these blocs form a coalition, of course the EU unification would be stopped. I think we need to look carefully at the case of Georgia. I returned from Georgia on Monday. So what I have seen there, so on every street corner, so billboards on the party number 41, which is a now leading pro-Russian party, colleagues at the university are threatened. The students are detained. They talk about the potential loss of visa in the EU, and of course, this all that the reforms and the progress the country has made is now is about to be lost. So I think this can happen to Moldova, and that's why it's very, very difficult to see a coalition in which so Moldova would advance at EU accession. There is our party leader, Partidul Nostru, led by Renato Usate, who appears in the polls. There's a populist party, yes, so they don't say yes, they don't say no. There is very unreliable leader, also has, as Sergiu mentioned, had some business in Russia, and it's not very clearly, there is no transparency in where the money come from in this party. Also not very clearly how they might play their card if they are in the parliament. So the question remains open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sergiu, do you want to add something onto that regarding
just a few words. If you look to this campaign and the discourse of the political parties and blocs which are involved in, you'll see that the majority are against PAS. Each party or leaders who are involved in this campaign, everyone is saying something against PAS. Only few exceptions. Let's say Liberal Party and Mihai Ghibu, who invited pro-European and right parties to do a step back and to support PAS in the final decision on Monday. Others, including pro-European, such pro-European parties or leaders, are trying to fight and to receive some support, to fight PAS and to receive some support from this kind of pro-European electorate. So situation, of course, it's very delicate. Speaking about coalition. So like Svetlana, I'm historian too. But anyway, I can say what already in society it's discussed, the future scenario. And in this context, which all of them are trying to fight against PAS, you can imagine on Monday they have to start negotiation. PAS, of course, has to do everything to try to build a coalition and to continue the pro-European way of development. Now, more and more is discussed the scenario of the coalition between PAS and Renato Usate, which is a very strange one. But we can imagine a few years ago when the PAS and Maia Sandu did a coalition of the Socialist Party, Dodon and others, just to fight against Dodon and his control of the country. So you see, politics are very complicated area, and it's also easy to anticipate how they will react. I think 100% it's clear that they will not do coalition of the communists with this bloc pro socialists and others who are involved in this, Voronin and Tarlev and others. So Alternativa could be an option, but it's also not so easy to anticipate such scenario, because not just Ion Ceban, who is declaring himself, and City Hall pro-European one, around him are other two guys who always were against PAS, and actually this course is very critique, and Kachuk, which is pro-Russian, it's very clear, and he was one of supported and author of Memorandum Cossack, and he recognized publicly this. So it's not so easy to imagine how they will create a coalition to rule the country together, because to sign an agreement is one step, but how to rule together, and Svetlana already mentioned, each step they have to agree, each project of law or each I don't know, other initiatives to improve the quality of I don't know, the judge system, or to do a step forward in reforming the prosecutor system and so on. So it's complicated. So today it's very complicated to say how they will negotiate, with whom they will create the coalition. So, but more and more during the last couple of days is discussed a scenario of coalition between PAS and Renato Usate, which is not the best, but also I think it's a unique case to. But let's see who will cross the parliamentarian border and will be part of the parliament. And on Monday morning, we could return to this question to discuss more or less clearly after the results.
Very much. Let's return to the question of Russian meddling in the elections. And according to a national survey of Moldova, 41% of those who voted yes in the EU accession referendum expect that Russian interference in the upcoming elections will actually be worse than last year. Of course, if you look at people who voted no, this is much lower. But in general, 25% of all respondents in this survey think that Russian interference will get worse. So my question to you, Sebastian, would be how free and how fair can these elections be considered in light of external influence, hybrid threats, and Russian disinformation and interference?
Thank you. Funny that you don't ask the political scientists what the future will look like, but although we also don't know what is going to happen. No, I have absolutely no idea. Although, I mean, the one thing is like Moldova has a long history of pro-European parties that were then very pro filling their own pockets. So the delineation of being a pro-European party. I'm not talking about PAS, obviously, but finding something that would be also pro-European and go in the same direction. It's very difficult, but I just want to underline again here, PAS has created that situation for themselves as well. There was no alternative unless you do some Orwellian doublethink to not vote for Maia Sandu in the presidential election and then vote for yes in the referendum, or the other way around. Anyway, the Russian interference, I presume that these elections will be free and fair, but of course, according to ODIHR standard, but of course it does have a tremendous influence, as it has in elections, pretty much all of them that we've talked about in the last couple of months and years when we look at the region of the IDM that we are covering. Because it has become very dangerous, that it can tip certain scales again, and lead into a certain direction. You don't have to win this election. You just have to destroy the possibilities for pro. It's not in this case. It's very driven between pro-European, pro-Russian, but I would say pro-democratic. Because if you look at certain aspects, and I wasn't aware about the danger, but it makes sense to me that, for instance, the vote of the diaspora could be banned if a certain coalition comes into power. And this is the challenge, that we as Democrats have to win each and every election. It's enough if you make the pro-democratic parties not win, or even get a certain a blocking minority when it comes to certain decisions. I think this is not the biggest challenge that Moldova is facing, but in general, I'm just saying that we have not come up with a good solution to sort of protect and make democracies resilient against this kind of interference. We cannot cancel elections, as it has been the case in Romania, again, because this will then actually fill into these Russian interference, that will amplify their possibilities to do this. So we need to be able to be strong enough and to be resilient enough before that happens. But this is, of course, especially challenging in a society that is very polarized, and is, of course, also especially challenging in a society that has predominantly gets their information and news also from Russian sources, and television channels. So there is already an in, and you can exploit that with all the other possibilities that you have. So you don't need to influence a certain amount of the population, because they would vote for pro-Russian parties anyways. So you target the ones who would maybe support pass and make the Moldovan democracy resilient. The sign of resilience would be that they can continue to govern and fulfill the track of European integration, which I would believe they would be able to do it if they get the chance. If they will get the chance, yeah, then I'm a historian and I don't have any idea either. Yeah.
Thank you. Svetlana, Suveica, do you want to add something regarding Russian interference? And maybe also what you expect now in the final days leading up to the vote regarding that?
Yes, I do believe that Moscow will not primarily interfere with by falsifying ballots, but it already did an immense damage, because it changed or attempted to change the political field before election through various strategies, from disinformation on social media to financing of parties, covert agitation, cyber attacks, and so on. So we learned about this from several very good journalistic investigations, also from Moldova, but also we have BBC investigation, Bloomsbury. So we have several investigations in which it is shown how hundreds of people, especially younger generation, are recruited online and instructed to learn how to generate news, in fact fake news, right? How to amplify the numbers of viewers, spread fake information, and so on, through several campaign or operations like Electoral Hackathon, Info Leader, Eurasia Leader, and so on. So those people are paid in rubles through the Russian bank, so-called PBS, linked to Elon Shore, either in crypto value or even in euro. And what amazed me, that those euros are coming from banks in Germany, France, and other European countries. So directly from Europe into Moldovan account, and those people are, I listened online to those investigations, and the people are ensured that there cannot be any consequences because the money are coming from European banks and there is no possibility to prove where the money come from. So 100 euro per month or so on. So you see artificial intelligence generated disinformation campaign, website, social media operations, every strategy in order to, but those can be attributed directly to Kremlin and to pro-Russian actors, and those are, as Sebastian already mentioned, designed to undermine the ruling pro-European party. And Ilan Shor, who is a former politician and is a convicted criminal, orchestrates and directly profits from this. We, on the one hand, we can think that might be those elections shall be considered or will be considered as being organized according to the rules. Nevertheless, we see that there are Russia pays Moldovan voters to participate in vote, and I think to vote accordingly. Of course, even in the last elections, voters received a WhatsApp group whom to vote, whom to give the vote. So this is I think this unique. This did not happen before. I mean, I don't know such examples, and I believe that during the next few days there might be also disinformation could intensify, fabricated statements, even by EU leaders might happen, even possible attack of electoral commission websites and system. Why this can sow doubt about counting votes in the right way. So it might be staged unrest or provocations. Who knows? So I think vigilance is there, and Moldovan authorities are well aware, and also European authorities are also well aware what about the threats. But also, regardless of the result, I would say, I think pro-European parties are prepared for any scenario. I think they are flexible in jumping in based on what the Kremlin would say, just to sow doubts, to raise a question mark about the free elections, to weaken public trust in the authority, and also in the EU perspective. I think this is directly related. Thank you
very much. Yeah, I would also be interested in Sergiu's opinion, but also in this context, I want to briefly mention again what I said in the beginning, the speech of Moldovan President Maia Sandu before in the European Parliament a little while ago, where she warned about Russian meddling, and where she also emphasized that EU accession is vital for Moldova's survival. And she called this election the most consequential election. So my question would also be about Russian disinformation and Russian interference, but also to what extent you agree with this assessment of Maia Sandu, and what a shift in direction would really mean for the country.
So the issue is not new; it's a long one. I think since our independence, the Russian interest it's growing up. Maybe we had a very short period of time between August and December of 1991, when the Russia was not so much not interested, but did not so much, because it accounted internal problems until December, collapse of Soviet Union, end of the Soviet Union. But after that, immediately they reestablished the huge interest in Moldova. And year by year, they demonstrated through different projects, through different activities. So I'll not describe the whole process. I will just mention one very important, actually, reality. In 2011, already the left parties, communists and socialists, were in opposition, and they did a lot of, let's say, demonstrations during the autumn and including the winter. And they use the pancards of some inscriptions which demonstrate the real, so behind it was Russia and the real interest of Russia, exactly what we have seen in Ukraine. Moldova это русская земля. So Moldova это Russian land. Exactly what is happening, what's happened at that time in Ukraine. And after that, not immediately, but in 2014, we know what happened. Occupation of Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine, and launching these two so-called republics, Donetsk and Lugansk. Exactly Transnistrian scenario where they reuse. So after that, they slowly try to provoke Moldova and to open another conflict. And many people forget about that. They planned to open another republic, Southern Bessarabian Republic, and it was a congress in Odessa with participation of Gagauzian Bashkan and other Moldovan political leaders. And after that, they organized, already mentioned, the referendum in Gagauzia with private money from Russia. So the Russian ties are going very deeply and in different areas and in different, and especially before the elections, we are seeing much more. After 2014 and after 2022, Russia changed the strategy. So they are always presented, but not so visible like it was before. So they are using different strategies, including the local leaders. So they used a lot Dodon, but without so much success. So they succeed to win the presidential elections 2016, but not so much what they expected later on. And then they invested, and still today they supporting via shore. His part and his blog is prohibited, but anyway, his ties are everywhere, and they are using the local people and citizens to like a huge network. And we have already published different papers and the result of investigations in Moldovan mass media, how the system works with the Russian money and how the shore, it's an intermediate guide between Russian government and Russian political bodies and Moldovan local authorities, including different political parties. And they are trying to multiply the parties. Now, government institutions prohibited, let's say, some parties, but they open another one, and we could see Great Moldova, or Moldova Mare, a new political party, which actually is doing the same what Shor or his parties did before, and provoking Romania at the same time. So in this case, and this is not new, including Voronin speculated about the recreation of Great Moldova, and including Putin directly when Dodon in some visits to Moscow, Putin gave a historic map to Dodon of the Great Moldova. So you see how Moldova it was before. It's like a provocation about relation of Romania. So nowadays the strategy is changed. But anyway, they are trying to do, like Maya Sandu declared, not just in the European Parliament, but in different other occasions, being abroad or in the country. So on, she's perfectly right. But I think another argument of disappointed people expected to be more strong rules against Russian propaganda, against Russian mass media, TV, broadcast, and so on and so on. So just few of them have been prohibited during the last 4 years. But Russian propaganda is still working on territory of Moldova. It's still accessible for Moldovan citizens. And people are following this discourse. I'm not speaking about Transnistria. I'm not speaking about Gagauzian cities, villages. I'm speaking about other parts of Moldova, and people who are just following the Russian discourse, Russian propaganda, and anti-European so-called arguments of skepticism, which is provided by the Russian propaganda. So still today, it's playing an important role, and Russia it's treating Moldova like a Russian land, and they intend to reestablish the control on this part of the world. I have seen a written question on the Q&A, and it's about the possible scenario to provoke different movement or different activities on the streets after the elections. Everything is possible. So let's hope that the Moldovan police and the Moldovan institutions will maintain the control, and which I think it's visible. We have another police and Minister of Internal Affairs. So now people are more trusting to the Moldovan police. They become more strong, more correct, not so much corruption. If the guys of the police will stop you of the car, they will not ask you for a bribe or something else. They will just control your ID and so on, and they will say if you did some wrong or not. So now I think we have a different policy, more, let's say, democratic and more correct than it was before. So probably, and declarations during the last couple of days and different other actions which they did together of prosecutor office against these projects and scenarios and money which are coming from Russia, especially, of course, to buy electorate. So let's hope that our institutions, state institutions, will do the job and will maintain the peace in Moldova. And even if the results will be not exactly what we're expecting, but we hope that we will maintain the peace in the country and will not go to the wrong scenario like it was in 2009. But everything is possible, of course. So, as Svetlana mentioned, Georgian scenario, they are trying to use Georgian scenario nowadays in Moldova.
Thank you very much. So yeah, if we would assume a more pro-Russian government after these elections, Sebastian, what do you think? What would this shift in direction mean for Moldova, but not only for Moldova, for the whole region, for the security in the region, and maybe also for the relationships of Moldova with Ukraine and Romania?
So I think on the one hand side, it's of course disencouraging for all other candidate countries to see that this process is something that even if we can see progress, that this is stopped. But of course, something that can be very challenging for an already very challenged European integration process for various reasons. And overall, of course, you could say, well, it's not such a big country. It's not something that would have an immediate effect. But I think if we see it in line, what has been mentioned with Georgia, where they did in 2003, they did a revolution where European Union flags have been flown. And they really went through massive meandering on that way to European integration. They finally arrive at the stage where they get the candidate status, which was not something that you could imagine at the time, just a couple of months before. And then this happens. And I mean, Georgia is more or less, I don't think it can be considered a candidate country anymore with any perspective. And if this, of course, then continues in Moldova, this is a serious challenge, because overall we would have to think we all have failed to provide the proper path of European integration. The security situation within Moldova is certainly a challenging one, I would say. There is then, of course, the possibility, as Sergiu said, anything could happen. There's different scenarios that we could imagine, but for the overall geopolitical situation, I don't see that much of a challenge, because this is not something that would have an immediate effect as long as Ukraine holds the line, as long as Ukraine is able to defend itself. If that changes, then this would also, of course, change, and then you could certainly see. I mean, it's not something that happens overnight all the time. But if we have a pro-Kremlin government in Chișinău, and we fail to support Ukraine, it's fairly clear that this would then also easily spill over into Moldova. And this is the worst case scenario that we should avoid at all costs.
Thanks very much. Svetlana, Suveica, do you want to add something regarding the effects of a more pro-Russian government on the regional stability, maybe, or on relationships with Ukraine and Romania?
Yes, I think there might be a hybrid warfare from Moldova to Ukraine. I mean, nothing good would happen in the case. I believe in the case the pro-Russian forces are coming to power. Dodon, as president, you might remember, he never visited Kiev or Bucharest. He was 46 times, I believe, in his 4 years of presidency in Moscow. And also we could see that the bilateral relations between the Moldova and neighboring countries suffered because of this of pro-Russian president being into power. So at this moment, I believe Ukrainians are very much following carefully what is happening in Moldova at every level. I know the academic level, but of course we can see from the publications, we can see from the discussions, also online with experts who are pointing out towards the fact that it is very important that in Moldova a pro-European course is maintained, that people are pro-EU oriented, but this is not enough. That should be reflected in the parties in power, in the parliament, in the decision-making process, which is very important for Ukraine now being in the war with Russia.
Thank you very much. I would now open the floor for questions from the audience, both on site here at the IDM, but also online on Zoom or YouTube. You can also ask questions. If you have a question, please maybe briefly introduce yourself and then briefly ask your question. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Also, my name is Ulrich Schneckener. I'm also a member of the International Council of the IDM. Like Sergiu. Hello, Sergiu. Nice to see you again. Thank you for this analysis. I would rather like to raise two points. The first is actually arriving from the discussion we had earlier. So my first issue is what went wrong with PAS in two regards. First, if you look from outside, it actually PAS had to do, and Maia Sandu and the government had to do an enormous task. And of course, it is impossible to solve all the issues in such a short period of time. In particular, in this time of multiple crises Moldova went through. I mean, the war in Ukraine, the refugee crisis, 800,000 Ukrainians crossing Moldovan borders in a very short period of time, the energy crisis, the economic issues related to that. So it's an enormous task for such a government. And why were they so bad in managing expectations, apparently? So that you talk about these disappointed people. So how can you be disappointed when you really take that into account, what the government really faced from outside challenges? And secondly, related to that, was it not possible for PAS to taking routes? I'm not talking about Gagauzia. I'm talking about the regions Sergiu was pointing to in the north, like in Belis, the second biggest city of Moldova, where PAS doesn't play a role. Why was it not possible for PAS to be more to take roots in these other parts of Moldova, where they could attract much more voters as compared to Gagauzia. And if I may, my second issue, or should I? My second issue is more related to the question of how does the war in Ukraine, against Ukraine, and the relationship with Ukraine, which has improved, I would say. I mean, if you compare that with the past, the Moldova-Ukrainian relationship have greatly improved. How does is this a topic in the campaign? How does this influence the election campaign?
Yeah, thank you so much for the comments and questions. Of course, it's very nice to see you. Unfortunately, just online, but anyway, we hope to meet each other again in Chișinău or in Vienna. About your first issue, of course, it's impossible to reach the goals and expectations of each citizens. But during this campaign and before, many other politicians or many other, let's say, officials from opposition and from supporters of the past, they expected more people, more professionals in the government, and changes in the government administration. They did the credits to one or another guys, but if they didn't reach the expectation, people expected to be changed, not to leave him or her until end of the mandate. And also many, so you mentioned at the beginning, the past one, 63 places in the parliament. It's a huge number. And I can say that 2/3 of the deputies were passive. We didn't see them in the public activities or some initiatives. Also, it's another. So you receive so much credibility and so modest initiatives. Just few guys were very much involved. They did some initiatives in various areas of the legal framework or of the other activities. So this, I think, from this perspective, many citizens expected to see more professionals and more, let's say, leaders in front of the one or another minister or agencies. And also increasing the salaries of the ministers or the leaders of some agencies. Which I think from one point it's, yeah, they are due, but you could see the difference, the high salaries of the high, let's say, public people and very modest salaries of teachers or other people who are working in administration or in the public sector. So also it's disappointing people who are daily working and doing the contribution and they're not receiving expected salaries, let's say. But of course, the past government, the first and the second one, I think they did a great job. And you mentioned different challenges, the crisis, the war, especially energetic crisis, which I think it was managed quite well, and including the crisis in Transnistria, just the last winter, I think also they might manage quite well. So concerning the refugees and this huge, let's say, provocation to Moldovan society, I think also they managed and they did a great job, and people understood correctly and have been involved in activities to support and to transit and to do housing and so on and so on. Now, during the campaign, the politicians from all parties, they didn't use so much the war in Ukraine. But you are right. The relation between Kyiv and Chișinău changed a lot. Now I could say that finally we have a real friendship and we support each other. Because before, you know very well how it was, just by declaration. And in 1992, maybe not officials, but a huge part of Ukraine supported separatists in the war, in this conflict. So nowadays it's totally different. And you could see the visits, so the Ukrainian leader to Moldova and Moldovan leader to Ukraine, and also meeting in different parts of the world, and by declaration and by modest support. But anyway, Moldova declared that they support Ukraine and always will give support, political support, and sometimes, of course, modest financial support too. But I think it's correctly to not speculate around the war. Some leaders declare something. We have to take into account the situation in Ukraine, and we have to take into account if the situation will change dramatically in Ukraine, will be the next. Some of them mentioned this, or From the opposition also, they try to say that the situation is dangerous and Moldova is provoking Russia. So, but occasionally, not exactly to be the flag in front of the political discourse during the campaign. No, they were more or less careful using the situation in Ukraine. Sometimes in some areas, people are saying that we would like to maintain the peace and the war is bad thing for everyone. It doesn't matter which party they are. So I think that they didn't use, and which is good, the situation in Ukraine.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe Svetlana Suveica wants to add something onto that, but I also have one more question from the chat that I would also add, and you can then decide on what you would like to answer maybe. So the question would be, there is limited choice for voters in the election. Can you comment on the extensive practice of the Central Election Commission of Moldova of disqualification of parties despite the legitimate security concerns? In the light of the war in Ukraine, is it not a danger that a filtered political spectrum undermines political pluralism, leads to self-censorship, and can erode public trust in the Moldovan democracy? So, Svetlana Suveica, please.
Thank you. I would like to briefly add on previous questions and then try to respond the last one. As I have observed that PAS had communication problems at the beginning when they came to govern. So and also as you mentioned, capacity problems because many deputies were invited after the party after they entered the parliament, invited in the government to become ministries and to fill other positions. So people from the list, you know, number 70, 80, and so on. So I think to 78 somewhere. So the last in the list did not accept, did not become deputies. Nevertheless, I believe that the first ones in the list were the most prominent personalities and had also some experience in governing and also in legislative. On the other side, there are many young people, many unexperienced people. I think that the problem was a party was people, specialists, Sergiu mentioned, and also if you ask me, I think I'm at certain point. I was at certain point disappointed that PAS did not form a coalition, a bloc with some pro-European parties, which could have been also a solution. That some maybe disappointed voters would have thought not voting PAS specifically, but voting a coalition bloc, pro-EU bloc, and also not waste votes for some parties, smaller parties, which might have potential, like bloc together, împreună, and also Liga Orașelor și Comunelor. I saw they are very active, the League of Cities and villages or communes. So it means there are alternatives, there are options also related to the last question, but those projects are quite new, quite late formed, so they did not have time, in fact, or possibility to expand their projects, to inform people about their existence. Also, I believe their airing time is pretty limited, so this could be also a problem. Yes, considering the last question, I think those parties that are banned, they were not necessarily because they appeared overnight, but yes, those are, some of them are pro-Russian projects, as Moldova Mare, for example, Why do we know that? There is a lack of transparency in financing. So this banning of parties is based on clear arguments, police searches, compromised materials, and so on. There is not a ban because the Electoral Commission decided so. So there also court appeals, and this party appeared again in the list, Moldova Mare. Nevertheless, I think that there could be some activities done in order to check those parties before allowing them to register in the electoral competition. So maybe the state institutions did not fully work, so to say, in order to impede the situation in which a party is banned from the election while it's already in the list. So I think there's a lot of work still to do and to learn how to avoid such confusing situation for electorate. It's a confusing situation indeed. So one needs to clarify before having those parties in the list whether they are clean, whether they have transparency in financing, whether they are a list of people who gave their signature in order the party to be registered. They are not fake, so to say. So we have a lot of points that have to be checked before the party is registered. So I think there is some discrepancies in those activities which led the Electoral Commission to act like that in the last hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sebastian, do you want to add something on any of these?
Yeah, I would. On the one hand, I would really underline. Yeah, I mean the banning was not only was it constitutional, it was also necessary. I would say, because I mean if you find out a clear money funneling. It has been mentioned that there were WhatsApp groups where they would wait, and I mean it's only that I would say unprofessionalism in that scheme that did Alexander Stoyanoglu not make him president, because and when it comes to the referendum, it was also if the Socialist Party would not have asked for abstention, it would also not have received a majority for it. So if there is a clear money stream and a clear violation of regulations, and then you ban a party, and then you come up with a new party which is essentially the same and uses the same back channeling and uses even the same people more or less. This is not banning plurality, and I think we have a lot of plurality of pro-Russian parties on the list already. But then on the other hand, what has also been mentioned by both Svetlana and Sergiu, and what I have also stressed is I think this very like limiting the space for other parties that are genuine pro-European and would be a natural ally of PAS in a political discourse is really, I would say, a grave mistake that here, especially Maya Sandu, has made. And Ulrich asked about the challenge of taking roots without. I mean, I know the situation on the ground in Belz from colleagues in Yash that have witnessed a very challenging environment, very pro-Russian, anti-Romanian even, and things like that. But I think it plays into the things that you have mentioned. We looked at it. They have mastered all these great challenges to get the candidate status, deal with the massive amount of refugees. I mean, this is almost a quarter of the overall population that is in Moldova comes, and you need to deal with this. The Russian interference, the money coming from shore and the likes, the challenges of the legacy of Plahotniuc and the likes. They have tackled these grand issues, but then maybe relied too much on, okay, if we go down the European path, the European Union integration path, and that do rely on these things that especially are also something that is important for the diaspora, you tend to forget another voting base that is essential in this country, which leans towards the Russian Federation. And if you do not make an offer that would also sort of appeal to them, this is very challenging, because this is then not, you know, in Transnistria, you can do that economically, and then you see that. This is what I would say is the difference between Transnistria and Gagauzia, where Gagauzia, that's ideological, much harder to get. In Transnistria, you can get them through the economic integration, and I mean, they do much more business with the EU than they do with the Russian Federation, and you feel and see that. And this is important, but again, quite a mistake, I would say, to make that sustainable. What PAS has achieved for the past 4 years.
Thank you very much. Yeah, unfortunately, we're at the end of our discussion today. Thank you very much to our 3 excellent speakers. Thank you to Svetlana, Suveica, Sergiu, Musteață, and Sebastian Schäffer. Please join me in a big round of applause for
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you also to our cooperation partners, Campus Tivoli and Creanga Institute, for him for the presentation of the briefing, and to him for helping with the streaming. Yeah, this discussion has been streamed and is also available online afterwards. And of course, we're very happy if you follow our social media channels, become a member of the IDM. You can find some membership applications there on the table, or also sign up for our newsletter to stay informed about all of our activities. Already next week, we will have another event on parliamentary elections in the region. It will be on the Czech elections on the 1st of October at 11 o'clock, I believe. So, of course, you're also very warmly invited to join that, either here or online. And also, if you want to know more about Moldova, Sebastian Schäffer and also my colleague Rebecca Thorne will be in Moldova this weekend. And I think they will share their impressions in a short video format, in our Fort Insights format on our YouTube channel. So you should be sure to check that out as well. And with that, I want to thank you very much for coming and joining the discussion. And I wish you a very nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Viele Grüße und bis bald.
Bye, Sergio.
Bye.